Hi there, this is Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our World News Programme. As concerns mount that Moscow is preparing to launch an invasion, Ukrainian government forces and Russian-backed separatists in the country's east have exchanged new accusations of bombing and other ceasefire violations amid Western warning blasts. The US President Joe Biden will speak with the transatlantic leaders on a phone call today about Russia's build-up of military troops on the border of Ukraine and US continued efforts to pursue deterrence and diplomacy. Europe and Africa are seeking to address three major challenges, namely security, health and stability, to change the status of their relations during the 6th summit of the European Union and the African Union, which is held for 2 days in Brussels. Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, has apologized after a study revealed that the Netherlands overlooked the systematic use of extrajudicial executions and torture during the 1945 Indonesian War of Independence. And Hong Kong's hospitals reached 90% capacity on Thursday, and quarantine facilities were at their limit as the city struggles to snuff out a record number of new COVID-19 cases by adhering to China's zero-tolerance strategy. Thank you for joining us, and we start with this developing story as concerns mount that Moscow is preparing to launch an invasion. Ukrainian government forces and Russian-backed separatists in the country's east have exchanged new accusations of bombing and other ceasefire violations amid Western warnings. Hossein Berkan reports.
Kiev and the rebels accused each other of escalating tensions with weaponry and mortar attacks on Thursday, raising fears that Russia, which is amassing more than 100,000 troops near the border with Ukraine, in what Western officials described as a possible excuse made by Moscow to justify the invasion. In turn, spokesman for the Donetsk Republic said that armed formations of Ukraine fired mortar shells in the direction of village of Mandrukino.
The situation on a contract line has been exacerbated dramatically. The enemy is trying to promote active combat action, and Ukraine's side continues to violate its obligation to observe the ceasefire.
Ukraine Russia-backed rebels exchanged accusations of Thursday bombing, but reports from both sides pointed to something more serious than a mere ceasefire violation, which are regularly reported on the line of the contact in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. Joe Biden, for its part, accused Russia of engaging in a false flag operations to have an excuse for the invasion.
We have reason to believe that they are engaged in a false flag operation to have an excuse to go in. Every indication we have is they're prepared to go into Ukraine, attack Ukraine.
Kiev and rebels have been at war in the Donbas region for 8 years, and the ceasefire between the sides is routinely violated. But the intensity of the fighting increased notably this week amid warnings from the United States and allies of a potential Russian invasion.
The Munich Security Conference starts as the stage for crisis diplomacy amid high tensions on the Russia-Ukraine border. World leaders converge this weekend on Germany will be dominated by the Ukraine crisis as major Western powers warn that Kremlin looks close to launching an invasion of the former Soviet states. Marwa Belaiwar has more details.
The Munich Security Conference has opened with world leaders, top officials, policymakers and security experts set to focus on the escalating crisis prompted by fears that Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine.
I am very sorry to see that the Russian government decided not to make use of the opportunity to explain the Russian position in this hall today or tomorrow. But let me reiterate that as far as the Munich Security Conference is concerned, our door, of course, remains open.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres told the opening ceremony today that it would be catastrophic if the Russia-Ukraine crisis escalated into war.
I'm often asked whether we are in a new Cold War. My answer is that the threat to global security now is more complex and probably higher than at that time. During much of the Cold War, there were mechanisms that enabled the protagonists to calculate risks and use back channels to prevent crises.
The gathering takes place as tensions soar along the Russia-Ukraine border, following the Kremlin's buildup of forces in the region, sparking fears of a new Russian invasion of its neighbor. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will face her highest stakes foreign policy assignment yet during the weekend in Munich, where she will try to keep European allies unified amid growing concern over the threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. As for the second day, February 19th, the foreign ministers of the G7 group of industrialized nations, including Blinken, will meet on the sidelines of the conference. Discussions about Ukraine, Russia and NATO are set to dominate the conference on February 19th also, while February 20th will be dedicated to the future of the European Union.
The US President Joe Biden will speak with transatlantic leaders on a phone call today, Friday, about Russia's build-up of military troops on the border of Ukraine and US continued efforts to pursue deterrence and diplomacy. Marwa Balhayawar again.
The White House said Biden will speak with transatlantic leaders on a phone call Friday.
That's why I asked Secretary Blinken to go to the United Nations and make his statement today. He'll lay out what that path is. I've laid out a path to Putin as well on, I think, Sunday. And so there is a path. There is a way through this.
In an increasingly volatile context between the United States, which now fears an attack from Ukraine in the next few days, and Russia, which announced on the contrary new military withdrawals, Washington and Moscow made confrontation at the UN Security Council. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken later echoed Biden, telling the UN Security Council that the world can expect to see Russia attack Ukraine within days.
And here today, we are laying it out in great detail, with the hope that by sharing what we know with the world, we can influence Russia to abandon the path of war and choose a different path.
Sergei Vershinin, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, disputed claims that Moscow is sidestepping its obligations because there is no mention of the Russian Federation in the Minsk agreements.
We increasingly believe that the implementation of the Minsk agreement is not something that is in the plans of the Ukrainian neighbors.
In response, Antony Blinken described implementation of the Minsk agreements as a goal we all share. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, acknowledged reports of fresh ceasefire violations across the contact line just hours earlier.
The reports of fresh ceasefire violations across the contact line over the past several hours. If verified, these violations must not be allowed to escalate further. We call on all sides to exercise maximum restraint at this time.
Moscow insists on the withdrawal of all U.S. forces and armaments deployed in Central and Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe, and the Baltic states, and also expects proposal from the Westerns to renounce any future enlargement of NATO, Ukraine in particular.
Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko said his country could host nuclear weapons if it faces any external threats. Lukashenko landed today in Moscow for talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin that Minsk said could determine how much longer Russian military forces remain in the ex-Soviet Republic north of Ukraine. Nabil Khazini reports.
Belarus would be ready to host nuclear weapons if threatened by the West. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko announced during his visit to Osipovsky nuclear weapons storage site on Thursday as part of joint Russian-Belarusian military drills.
If necessary, if such stupid and reckless measures are taken by rivals and adversaries, we will deploy not only nuclear weapons, but also super-nuclear weapons, promising weapons, in order to defend our territory.
After the breakup of the former Soviet Union in 1991, Belarus gave up the nuclear weapons deployed on its territory under US pressure. This will remain the same if the country isn't threatened from what Lukashenko called unfriendly countries.
If there were no threats from unfriendly countries to Belarus, there would be no need for nuclear weapons here for 100 years.
As tensions between Russia, an ally of Belarus, and NATO have reached unprecedented levels over troop movements near Ukraine, Russia and Belarus have begun joint military exercises close to the Belarusian border with neighboring Ukraine. The Belarusian president arrived today in Moscow, where he was warmly welcomed by his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Both presidents will attend a military exercise which Putin described as a serious event.
Now, an active phase exercise of military drills is underway, and tomorrow we will even take part together in one of the serious events in this complex of military cooperation.
Earlier today, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that Putin would oversee exercises the following day that would involve the launch of cruise and ballistic missiles.
These military exercises drills are purely defensive and are not a threat to any other country.
The Russian president gave no further specifics regarding the exercise in his remarks with Lukashenko, while his denial of a potential invasion of Ukraine followed Western leaders warning an incursion is imminent as Moscow amasses more than 150,000 troops at the border.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said on Friday he held a productive meeting with Poland's defense minister over Russia's military activities around Ukraine. He also said the United States looks forward to increasing their interoperability through Poland's acquisition of M1A2 Abrams tanks.
Today, I'm proud to announce another step in this growing partnership. In response to Poland's formal request in July of 2021, Secretary Blinken and I have relayed our intent to Congress to offer Poland the opportunity to acquire 250 M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks. The time frame for delivery of these tanks is currently under discussion.
Hundreds of people have been rescued from a ferry that caught fire between Greece and Italy, while 3 people were injured. According to Greek authorities, Greek media reported that at least 10 people were feared missing. Authorities could not confirm the information, saying the operation was still ongoing. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and during a press conference in Brussels, underlined that Germany is ready if a military invasion occurs to work closely with NATO allies along with the US and EU to impose severe sanctions on Russia. However, he stressed that Russia's forces could not be underestimated. Let's have a listen.
We are prepared if there is a military invasion of the Ukraine. This will have a consequence, and we will react united with sanctions that will be established by the European Union, by the United States, our allies in NATO, and they will be very, very severe as well.
The EU welcomed more than 40 African leaders to Brussels on Thursday in an effort to reassert its influence on a continent where China and Russia have made hefty investment in roads and where many felt let down by Europe's COVID-19 vaccines rollout. Usama Ayedi has more details.
The European and African leaders met on Thursday in Brussels on the first day of the EU-African Union Summit, aimed at reinventing their partnership and facing common challenges, a few hours after France and its allies formalized their withdrawal from Mali. After a short meeting of the 27 on tensions around Ukraine, 40 of the 55 African Union leaders met with their EU counterparts for the 6th summit of the two organizations.
Yes, we accept what assistance we have received, but it is not sustainable. Help to empower us. Let us tackle obstacles together and demonstrate to the world that Africa has the ability, the scientists and industries to provide the vaccines, the therapeutics and diagnostics needed to manage African health.
The summit presents a unique opportunity to lay the foundations for a deeper African Union and European Union partnership, with the highest political involvement and based on trust and a clear understanding of mutual interest. Leaders are expected to discuss how both continents can build greater prosperity. The aim is to launch an ambitious Africa-Europe investment package, taking into account global challenges such as climate change and the current health crisis. They should also be talking about tools and solutions to promote stability and security through renewed peace and security architecture.
Today, I'm delighted to announce the first 6 African countries that will receive technology from the hub to produce their own mRNA vaccines: Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia.
Indeed, I consider this not only as a major step forward in the fight against the pandemic, but also as a major step forward in Africa's strategic sovereignty.
The Europeans also want to launch a global investment strategy with 150 billion euros over 7 years to help projects wanted and carried by Africans.
Hong Kong's hospitals reached 90% capacity and quarantine facilities were at their limits as the city struggles to snuff out a record number of new COVID-19 cases by adhering to China's zero-tolerance strategy. To ease the strain on the city's healthcare system, officials said they will take a different approach to hospitalization and isolation policies and allow some patients to be discharged sooner. The new move comes amid reports of patients being treated on beds outside the hospital in the city's working-class neighborhood of Sham Shui Po.
It's tough to prevent the virus even if you have taken every precaution. It will cost a lot if Hong Kong wants to stamp out coronavirus infections like mainland China. I think the mainland's COVID control measures may not suit Hong Kong.
Dynamic zero COVID is not impossible. If everyone in Hong Kong is willing to get vaccinated, the situation will be better. If you look at mainland China, the vaccination rate is as high as 90%, so that they can control it better. Many people in Hong Kong are only getting the first dose now, so of course the situation isn't as good as the mainland.
Canadian truckers are telling that their protests against COVID-19 restrictions are distracting attention from real challenges they face, and police in Ottawa are working to clear the centre of the capital 3 weeks after protests shut it down. Sofiane Kinturi has more insights regarding this story.
For weeks, anti-vaccine demonstrators have blocked Ottawa and Quay border crossings, inspiring protests around the world and injecting political instability into stunned Canadian government.
Some protesters came to Ottawa to express their frustration and fatigue with public health measures, and that's their right. Like I said, it's a right that we'll defend in this free and democratic country. But illegal blockades and occupations are not peaceful protests. They have to stop.
As police moved in to disperse protesters that have encircled the Canadian capital for 3 weeks, they urged protesters to stay peaceful and lawful. People were being moved to places around a kilometre from Parliament held by Ottawa and Ontario Provincial Police.
To those engaged in the unlawful protest, if you want to leave under your own terms, now is the time to do it.
On Thursday, police arrested 2 of protest leaders. They started threatening trucks in Ottawa on Wednesday that if they didn't leave, they'd be arrested.
Overnight and into today, we've begun to harden the perimeter around the protests. We're installing fencing and other barriers throughout the area.
At around 8 a.m. Friday, dozens of police vehicles, including a large black armored car and possibly 100 officers, arrived near Mackenzie King Bridge and Waller Street, next to the Ottawa Art Gallery, where about 20 vehicles had been parked since late January, blocking the roadway.
To another story now, the landslides and floods that swept through the tourist city of Petropolis near Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, have killed at least 117 people. The meteorological authority stated that during a few hours, this region witnessed about 260 millimeters of rain, which is more than what was expected for the whole month of February. Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, has apologized after a study revealed that the Netherlands overlooked the systematic use of extrajudicial executions and torture during the 1945 Indonesian War of Independence. More details with Miriam Zian.
The Netherlands Prime Minister Mark Rutte has apologized to Indonesia after a study revealed the Dutch army used systematic and extreme violence to regain control of its former colony at the end of World War II.
For the systematic and widespread extreme violence by the Dutch side in those years and the consistent ignorance of the acts by the previous cabinet, today I make a deep apology on behalf of our government to the people of Indonesia.
According to Dutch and Indonesian researchers following years of investigation, the Dutch forces burned villages, carried out mass detentions, torture and executions during the 1945 conflict. The findings contradict the long-held official Dutch view that there were only isolated incidents of excessive violence by its forces. A Dutch historian who participated in the study said that the violence by Dutch army was overlooked and is widely considered as war crimes.
The politicians responsible turned a blind eye to this violence, just as in military, civil and legal authorities. They aided it, they concealed it, and they punished it barely or not at all.
On the other hand, a representative of the Netherlands Veterans Institute criticized the findings, and a Dutch analyst criticized the PM's apology.
I think it is extremely ridiculous.
Indonesia declared independence in 1945, shortly after the defeat of the Japanese, who had occupied the country during the Second World War. But the Dutch wanted to hang onto their former colony and send troops to put down the independence uprising. About 100,000 Indonesians died as a direct result of the war, with the Netherlands withdrawing in 1949. It is not the first time that the Netherlands apologizes for post-war violence. King Willem-Alexander did apologize to Indonesians in 2020. However, it is the first time that the Dutch acknowledged was excessive.
Fighting in northern Ethiopia's Afar region has engulfed a camp housing refugees from neighboring Eritrea, the UN said on Friday, killing 5 and forcing thousands to flee. The assault earlier this month is the latest blow to the more than 100,000 Eritrean refugees living in Ethiopia, whose camps have been repeatedly caught up in an ongoing 15-month war. Bamako asked France to withdraw its soldiers from Mali on Friday, a day after Paris announced a withdrawal in the next coming months, Miriam Zian reports.
The authorities of transition in Mali asked France to withdraw its forces from Mali without any delay, a day after the French president's announcement that France and its partners will withdraw in the next months. In a televised statement, the spokesman for the government, Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga, describes the announcement of the French disengagement as a flagrant violation of the agreements between the two countries. The spokesman added that the result of 9 years of French engagement in Mali have not been satisfactory.
These unilateral decisions constitute flagrant violations of the legal framework binding France and Mali. The government recalls that compared to the expected results, the results obtained and officially announced by the French authorities were not satisfactory.
As France and its allies announced the start of a military pullout of Mali, President Emmanuel Macron said Niger had agreed to host European forces. The request for immediate withdrawal from the colonels who came to power by force in August 2020 is a new challenge to the former French partner after months of rising tensions.
And finally, Algeria's Sonatrach has signed on Thursday a contract with the Chinese group Sinopec LPEG, and Sinopec SIPS. The project will raise the company's LNG storage capacity and increase associated removal volume. Miriam Zian reports.
The Algerian oil company Sonatrach entrusts the Chinese group Sinopec the realization in EPC, the project of the dismantling of 2 existing tanks situated at the Skikda liquefaction complex GLK-1 and the completion on the same area of a new LNG storage tank of a capacity of 150,000 cubic meters. The total amount of the contract is of 25 billion dinars and with a 40 months completion period.
It is an EPC contract, which has a value of more than 25 billion dinars of a period of 40 months of realization. So within 40 months, there will be the demolition of 2 existing storage tanks and the building of a new tank of 150,000 cubic meters. Thus, our strategy is to increase liquefied natural gas export capacities. That's our goal.
The project also includes the supply and installation of equipment to connect the future storage tank to the new LNG loading system of the new Skikda jetty,
which will allow for the removal and significant rotations of export LNG vessels. Once commissioned, this project will raise Sonatrach's LNG storage capacity and increase the associated removal volume.
This project aims to supply all the necessary equipment for the pumping and filling liquefied natural gas, which is part of the renewal and expansion of the oil port of Skikda, where work has already been launched and is in the process of completion. Renewing the expansion of the oil port of Skikda and building new LNG storage tanks aims to increase Sonatrach's gas export capabilities and direct this LNG to distant markets like Asia and South America.
The conclusion of this contract will strengthen Sonatrach's LNG export capacity, which aims to reinforce its position as a regional leader in LNG's production. Algeria is one of the world leading exporters of liquefied natural gas and the fourth exporter of natural gas.
That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. The news continues on Alt 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.